sorry, I didn't see you there. I was daydreaming. Paris syndrome is a term used to describe a condition that is often experienced among Japanese tourists in particular, when they go to Paris expecting it to be the trip of their dreams, only to realize that it doesn't measure up. The shock from their unmet expectations can even lead to symptoms such as depersonalization, anxiety, hallucinations, and more. Now, when looking at confounding factors, you have to account for exhaustion and other variables, and Paris syndrome is not yet in the DSM, which means it either hasn't been reviewed by a committee or it doesn't meet the requirements. But anyway, I like it as an analogy. For any newcomers, I'm an atheist. So as some of you know, I grew up in the church, or when I was at school, it was called chapel. And I thought that when I was going to church, I was being taught the Bible, which much of the time was true, but something dawned on me when I was in college. I was also being marketed to. I started to really question the church culture around me when I was working as an intern for a mega church, and my boss suggested to me that I put the prettiest girls on greeting teams so that when guys came to the church, their first impression was cute women. So basically, he was trying to use sex appeal to market Jesus. And don't worry, for the Christians watching, you're not all like that. I wasn't either. But let's talk about it. My boss at the time was really into using marketing to lure people into the church because he had read Andy Stanley's book Deep and Wide, which suggests that you use the surrounding culture to make church interesting and communicate in a way that people can understand. And I'm all for communicating in a way that people can understand and making things interesting. I try to make weird thumbnails to get people's attention, and I need marketing to get people to hear some ideas that I find important. But does God need marketing? At the time, I was more on the side of David Platt's book Radical, which suggests that the church should be giving as much money as possible to the poor instead of the pastor. I believed in a more humble approach, and I didn't really see how having a 50-foot cross in the courtyard was more important than helping the needy. I was told all of my life that God wanted me to share the gospel, so I felt like it was my calling to become a missionary. And then one day when I was expressing some frustration and desperation that I might not be able to go and do missions work to save all the orphans, a pastor rebuked me and told me God didn't need me. I was also realizing as an adult that my life didn't really match up to what I was told it was going to be in church growing up. In weekly chapels, I was told how God was going to bless my life if I followed him, but then when I faced some real hardships, I realized that real life wasn't meeting my expectations. And then I thought maybe I had misinterpreted what God's real plan was, seeing that many verses were saying you're actually going to suffer your entire life for the sake of God's kingdom, and maybe God will reward you in heaven. So how do we tell the difference between marketing and manipulation? Does God really only speak through people, and thus does he need marketing, or is he capable of speaking on his own? And where does false advertising fit into all of this? And what marketing strategies do churches use, and what does that say about God? And who invented marketing strategies, God or people? So first we have to ask, what is marketing? Marketing is the process of identifying, anticipating, and satisfying needs and desires. Like I said before, there's nothing wrong with it in business or using marketing to bring attention to ideas, but if God moves through the Holy Spirit, why would the church need marketing strategies? I'm not saying that everything that I list from here on out is always intentional, but let's use the 4 P's to examine Christian church marketing. The 4 P's are product, the gospel, place, the church. This could mean Bible study or whatever platform they use. Price. I'm confused about the price here. Is it your behavior or a belief? It's really tricky to answer what price God is asking, because John 3:16 says that it's the belief that God is asking for. But James 2 insinuates that you don't actually believe if it's not exhibited in your actions. So I'm going to say that the price is altering your behavior because beliefs influence behavior. And the last P is promotion. This takes place primarily through network marketing, people telling other people around them about the product. Now, of course, people don't call sharing the gospel networking. They call it sharing their testimony. And testimonies are considered anecdotal evidence. And anecdotal evidence is fine. We didn't always have replicable scientific studies available to us. So we've operated off of anecdotal evidence for most of our history. But the danger of anecdotal evidence is that people can give it more weight than it should have. For example, when you see weight loss testimonies and then later find long-term studies that conclude that the product that they were promoting made people sick, or that they didn't actually lose any extra weight from using the product, but just maintained a sufficient calorie deficit. When I would hear testimonies in church, people would usually talk about finding God in a vulnerable place. Then they would claim that they felt better once they gave their life over to Christ, but didn't take into account the other psychological reasons that they might feel a certain way. Could it be that they got a better social support network, or started making goals and achieving them, or unlearning learned helplessness? Maybe they started finally receiving words of affirmation. And people tend to do better when they feel a sense of purpose. So one could ask, did God make things this way intentionally, or did humans discover spirituality because of these subjective experiences? Appealing to attractiveness bias. Things that are aesthetically pleasing often indicate that they are good, beneficial, or safe. And the churches I worked for heavily invested in this. Set design, pamphlets, massive decorations. Which again is fine, except confusing when your whole message is about giving up earthly possessions for a heavenly inheritance. Or is it? It depends which of the many denominations you ask. And this ambiguity explains why my boss and I had very different ideas about how we should be spending the money brought in from tithing. Adopting trends and culture made sense when I thought about meeting people where they were at, but I was convinced that we were called to be not of this world. And I started to wonder what would be left if we took down all the embellishments. As an atheist and science lover, I see that attractiveness bias most likely developed from wanting to avoid disease throughout the process of our evolution. You know, things that don't look too icky are probably safe, and we're compelled to want to survive and seek safety. And our inclination to maintain safety is the reason that people make investments on perceived risk. The message of the gospel plays into this. The Bible teaches that people are at risk of hell, and that a lack of belief will lead to depravity. But I already addressed that a few videos ago. Only focusing on the threat of hell seems like framing, because I have yet to hear a pastor validate the risk of being wrong during an altar call. They offer you a relationship with Jesus, but a relationship where doubts are never valid is a mentally abusive relationship. If your religion is true, religious people should portray atheist arguments with intellectual honesty, and there should be no need for straw men or silencing. Altar calls. Where in the Bible does it say that people should make snap decisions about this? They're pitched as a limited time offer. Do you know that if you died today, you wouldn't go to hell? Is accepting the message supposed to be based on an emotional decision or facts? I personally think we should aim to empathize with emotions and make decisions based on facts. And if it's not supposed to be an emotional decision, if it's supposed to be a decision based on facts, why is there always a keys progression playing? Incentive. If it's just an option and not a hard sell, what is the deal with heaven and hell? Also, this limited time only pitch sounds like a gaslighting car salesman. If you don't buy this, you're really gonna pay the price. I swear the threat of hell is just operating off of FOMO. It's not that God wants to torture you with his wrath. Like, if you don't want to come to the party, like, you just don't have to come. But people want safety. We find all kinds of ways to feel safe. And it gives us a competitive advantage when we have numbers on our side. So we tend to follow the beliefs and behaviors of those around us. This is why we're susceptible to the bandwagon effect. Things look safer to us when a lot of people are on board with them, which is why it's so hard when you have a new channel on YouTube. There is no bandwagon to make your channel seem appealing, but I don't want people to subscribe because other people are doing it. I want them to subscribe because I make good content. No? Okay. Well, if that doesn't work, how about I try the mirror exposure effect? Coca-Cola is famous or infamous for using this technique. Something can seem good or beneficial or true because it's familiar. We are creatures of habit after all. And And I'm reminded of when I was told over and over to read the Bible daily, attend church regularly, and be yoked with like-minded people. Okay, I'm just gonna read these next 2 marketing techniques to you and let you make the connection. Foot in the door technique. The foot in the door technique is a compliance tactic that aims at getting a person to agree to a large request by having them agree to a modest request first. The technique works by creating a connection between the person asking for a request and the person being asked. If a smaller request is granted, then the person who is agreeing feels like they are obligated to keep agreeing with larger requests. This technique works by creating a connection between the person asking for a request and the person being asked. If a smaller request is granted, then the person who is agreeing feels like they are obligated to keep agreeing to larger requests to stay consistent with the original decision of agreeing. The door in the face technique. The door in the face technique is a compliance method commonly studied in social psychology. The persuader attempts to convince the respondent to comply by making a large request that the respondent most likely will turn down, much like a metaphorical slamming of a door in the persuader's face. The respondent is then more likely to agree to a second and more reasonable request than if that same request is made in isolation. Then there's the IKEA effect. When people make investments in things like building IKEA furniture, they become more attached to the brand. So if you invest in the church financially or spend time and energy building up the church in some way, you're more likely to hold a bias towards it. Availability heuristic. Where are you getting the information that's shaping your worldview? What about the information you have on the atheist worldview? Are you getting your information from pastors or atheists? Are you getting your information from people with the same worldview or all kinds of sources? Good critical thinkers are always trying to find their blind spots and ask, what haven't I considered? Bias makes people selective with where they get their information. So I'm skeptical of studies I hear cited by vegans or straight-up carnivores, because people often pay special attention to the science that supports the view they already hold and ignore information that doesn't validate their interests, which is why I feel vegans' best bet is in their moral argument. Like when my friend told me what it's really like when baby cows are taken away from their mother for milk. And I was like, no thank you, I don't want to know that. And then 6 months ago I heard Cosmic Skeptic give a really compelling speech on veganism. But I was like, this is not a cult. I'm not going to just go ahead and do everything that Alex says. I mean, he's my Hitchens, he's not my Jesus. That's Hemant Mehta. Someone didn't like my video? Help me, Hemant Mehta. And then I did a video on the history of a group of people that ignored cruelty for the sake of short-sighted self-interest. And I was like, oh, wait, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, marketing. And the last thing that I'll bring up that is a marketing technique at best, but doesn't make something true, is survivorship bias. Concentrating on the people who have maintained their Christian beliefs happily and disregarding the people who find it to be an unhealthy experience. Because there are reasons why it might work for one person and not someone else, besides a measure of faith or the condition of their heart. This is also especially prevalent at MLM conferences, because I'm just gonna piss everyone off today. I'm not doing this to be mean. I'll explain everything in my next video. But should you be selling peppermint to your small group, or would Jesus be flipping tables? And is prayer as much of a placebo as essential oils? So I ask you, are your expectations lining up with reality? And if not, why? Is it because you're entitled and sinful, or is it because we have the cognitive ability to plan ahead, and sometimes we're given unrealistic ideas? And have you gotten unrealistic ideas from the church? What haven't you considered? This is actually really good. I loved that. That was like, that was 10 times better than I expected. I wish I bought 2.